Advanced Research College, or SPARC, conference series, which today will be featuring the professors and returning faculty scholars of the College of Science and Mathematics. To formally welcome us and provide the rationale for today's program is none other than the SPARC project leader and a faculty member of the College of Agriculture, Dr. Mary Joy S. Caniotas.
A warm welcome to the SPARC Conference Series. We are delighted to have all of you here today. This conference is a celebration of knowledge where our esteemed professors and returning faculty scholars will share their expertise and passion. Throughout the event, you'll hear about groundbreaking research, innovative teaching methods, and exciting discoveries in the fields of science and mathematics. This is only the start. So we will have like this in every month until December. So let's dive in. Get ready for an inspiring day filled with intellectual exchange and camaraderie. Let the conference begin.
Thank you, Dr. Caniotas, our project leader. And now, we have come to the highlight of your program. Of course, may I request Professor Reggie A. Ele, the faculty member from the College of Science and Mathematics, to individually introduce them before their presentation. Ma'am Jane.
Welcome to today's session of the SPARC Conference Series. We will be delighted to hear updates from the world of physical and natural sciences. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker for this inaugural series. Let me start. He is a distinguished mathematician whose academic journey began with a BSc Applied Mathematics from the University of the Philippines and culminated in a PhD in Mathematics from Mindanao State University, Iligan Institute of Technology. His expertise in graph theory and optimization was further honed during his tenure as a visiting researcher at Tribhuvan University, Kathmandu, Nepal, and with the University of Kaiserslautern, Germany, sponsored by the prestigious Germany Academic Exchange Program. He has made significant contributions to the field through his presentations at esteemed international conferences, including the Integer Programming and Combinatorial Optimization Conference at Georgia Tech University, the International Workshop on Domination in Graphs in India, the Australian Combinatorics Conference in Melbourne by the University of Melbourne, and the Workshop on Algebraic Graph Theory and Quantum Information hosted by the Fields Institute for Research in Mathematical Sciences and the York University in Canada. His commitment to professional development is evident from his participation in advanced training programs such as the SEAMS School of Scientific Computing for differential equations and applications, the British Combinatorial Conference hosted by the Durham University, United Kingdom, the Latin American Workshop on Clicks in Graphs, and the Autumn School on Optimization and Market Design, hosted by the Trier University in Germany. His professional affiliations with Mathematical Society of the Philippines and with renowned international organizations like the London Mathematical Society, Combinatorial Mathematics Society of Australasia, European Mathematics Society, and the International Linear Algebra Society underscore his standing in the global mathematical community. His scholarly contributions are well recognized with a number of publications in journals indexed in Scopus and Web of Science, particularly in the areas of Roman and Italian graph domination and coding theory. Our speaker stands as a beacon of excellence and dedication in the mathematical sciences continuously pushing the boundaries of knowledge and application in his field. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Leonard M. Paleta, PhD.
I'm overwhelmed with the introduction. So my talk is just an introduction to the world of graph theory. I am not expecting too much. I lowered it down and expect that you will not see here equations in front of it. The graph theory started in 1735. One mathematician sparked his interest in solving these 7 bridges of Königsberg. Now, Kaliningrad in Russia. The city had 2 islands that were connected to the mainland through bridges. The problem here is there a possibility of finding a path over every one of the 7 bridges, but without crossing any bridge twice? So as you can see here, that is the old Russia. And you can see here the color green, that is the bridges. So, makita nyo dyan, we have 7 bridges where the land masses are represented by dots. In graph theory, we call that vertex or nodes, and the bridges are the edges. So the problem here is that if you're a tourist, can you traverse or can you pass all the bridges without repetition? Can you? Sige daw. On the right side, as you can see, meron tayong graphical representation. So if you are tasked to travel the bridges where there is no repetition, maubos yung gasolina ninyo, no? Kung sa actual bridge yan. Tama? Actual situation. So that's why we use here graphical representations. So the first person to solve is this Swiss mathematician named Leonhard Euler. In doing so, he invented a new branch of mathematics called graph theory. So out of that, he proved otherwise. If the path begins and ends at the same vertex, then no vertices will have an odd degree. Kasi mo dito, this vertex, meron siyang degree. Meaning to say, how many vertices, how many edges connected sa vertex. So this 3, that one is 5, this is 3, another 3. In fact, no even degree vertex. So it is not possible. So let's try to define, not technically, the definition of the graph. So a graph consists of vertices or nodes and the edges or relationships connecting them. So there are a lot of applications of graph, and I will cite some later. The nodes here are B, C, D, A, F, and E. And the line segment connecting them, like vertices A and B, is edge. We can call that edge AB or edge BA. So we have some examples of graph. Here we have a simple graph. The other one is a multigraph or non-simple graph. In the simple graph, wala kang makitang loop. Here we have also here parallel edges. Meaning to say, from vertex A, vertex B, more than one yung edges connecting them. Okay? So kung road yan siya, from point A to point B, we have other alternative routes. So for simple graphs, we have here undirected. So meaning to say, wala kang makita ang mga arrows. We have also here directed. You can see there arrows, for instance, here. So this one goes here, and hindi ka pwede bumalik kasi nga arrow na. This one is a weighted vertex. Why? Because the edges are labeled with numbers. Meaning to say, if we let that weight as distances from one vertex to another, yun siya. Yung papasok na vertex, yung papasok na edge, in degree ang tawag sa kanya. Yung palabas, out degree. A non-simple, directed, weighted graph. Non-simple in the sense that meron tayo dito parallel edges. So, kanina, sa definition natin ng graph, the edge represent relationship. So, pwedeng relationship doon sa ating graph, maybe love affair, maybe enemy, friendship, influence, In sciences, for example, it could be predator-prey relationship, producer-consumer relationship, or simply rin research collaboration relationships. Paano kung single ka? Saan ka ngayon sa graph? Dito kayo mga single. In graph, tawag sa inyo, isolated vertex. In statistics, we call that outliers. In psychology, we call that deviance. So ito naman yung relationship. Ito martyr, ito. Why? Because it is a one-sided love. Ibig sabihin siya, mahal niya ito. Pero hindi siya reciprocated. This one is two meanings. It could be mutual relationship or pwede rin siyang double-sided arrow. XI loves, XJ loves. So let's proceed to more on applications of graph theory. Ito yung mga applications ng graph theory in computer science, computer network, engineering, math, and operation research. We have physics, chemistry, and biology, social science also, linguistics, and Google Maps. I will not give all the applications, I will just give some. First is applications of graph theory in social networks. Okay? So what is a social network analysis? So SNA studies the relationships and interactions within a network using nodes represented by people and edges relationships through the use of networks and graph theory. So for instance, we have here 1,000 Facebook users and we have a data on friendships and post interactions. So kung friend kayo ng crush mo, so meron kayong edge. So kung hindi ka tinanggap, i-decline ang iyong friend request, wala kayong edge. Correct? So wala kayong connection. You could be a follower, pero hindi kayo friend. So here, we're going to identify influencers, or user A has the most friends. Okay, yung iba 100 friends na, iba 15. Find communities, 3 main groups of users based on common connections. We could track information flow. A post by user B goes viral, spreading luckily through the network. We could also use SNA on Facebook. We can see how users connect, identify key influencers, and understand how information spreads within the social. Okay. Another one, we have here organizational network analysis. So, analyzing organization networks. Okay. It is a method used to visualize and analyze relationships and flow information among individuals within an organization. It helps to understand how communication and collaboration occur, identify key influencers, and uncover opportunities to improve efficiency and innovation. So, usually, yan yung ating structure, no? Pero sa kabila, sabihin natin sino yung may contact with the other employees. So, we can do a structure or networking structure. Yung green dyan, mapansin mo, siya yung may pinakamaraming degrees. They're just connected to him. Tawag sa kanya, central vertex. Okay? It holds network together and can become a bottleneck. This one is a peripheral. Dito lang siya connected. Wala siyang connection sa ibang employee. That one, sociology for instance. Business management or program management. So you can see here the interplay between legal, finance, accounting, communications, and quality control, IT, and so on. So here are the steps to conduct an organizational analysis. I will not dig deeper next. Okay, punta naman tayo sa transportation networks. So using graph theory, we can visualize the networks. Okay, we have here the air networks, edges, vertices here to stand the airports, maritime networks, yung mga vertices na yan, yung mga routes nila. Okay, ano ito? Protein interaction network, the proteins found differentially expressed in RT. Ecological networks. Yan. So if you're teaching STS, pwede natin ipakita ito. No? Okay, nabalik tayo. Halimbawa dito, Sa mga thesis, pwede na yan. You have here the triangle here are the human stressors, dredge, pesticides, you have the sewage. Yan, beautiful. Ito, meron tayong social network, meron tayong ecological network sa ating mga entong. Pwede ba yan? So you might ask, ano yung mga visualization tools na available online? Some are free, some are required. Jeffy, Cytoscape, Jvisto, SOCNET V. Ito yung sikat. Have you encountered this figure? This one. Graphtex, we have also Graphtex. Cosmograph, Retina, we have Tulip, Orange, Kumu. Yeah, that's a planar example. This one, circuits. You can see sa circuits, wala yan siyang crisscrossing. Yeah, we have here the water utility lines, trains sa Pilipinas. Train stations. If you can see here, mayroong crisscrossing, but that is minimal. These vertices are the stations, train stations, and so on. So, last dito is the four-color theorem. Pansin nyo dito, in any graph, or in any map, gamit na tayo ng 4 colors. In such a way that, magkatabi yung dalawang area, you cannot color it with the same color. Thank you.
At this juncture, we will be hearing the heavenly bodies. So moving forward to the next speaker, will bring us to the heavenly bodies, as I mentioned. She is considered as the first astrophysicist of the Philippines. She is in the University of Southern Mindanao. Her work will focus on dark matter in galaxy clusters using astronomical data on X-ray astronomy satellites of Chandra and PROSAT. The Chandra X-ray Observatory is NASA's flagship X-ray telescope, while the Rosat Space Telescope is a joint project of Germany, United States, and United Kingdom. She had also worked as a postdoc research fellow at the Space Science Lab of the Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology in Daejeon, South Korea, under the Brain Korea 21 or BK21 scholarship program. In KAIST, her team had worked on molecular clouds, supernova remnants, and star-forming regions in the Milky Way galaxy using FUV data from FIMS SPAR, the primary payload on SAT-1, Korea's first astronomy satellite. So bear with me, please. Currently, she is a professor at the University of Southern Mindanao and the chairman of the physics department. She obtained her undergraduate degree in physics from the Mindanao State University, Marawi City. Her master's degree in physics from the Mindanao State University in Iligan Institute of Technology, and her doctoral degree in physics, specializing in astrophysics from Hiroshima University, Japan, under the MEXT Japanese Government Scholarship Program. A round of applause as we welcome Dr. Jelly Grace Nonesa.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. So today, I will be talking about things beyond your imagination. So we have here dark matter in galaxy clusters. Does dark matter really matter? Let's see. So the first question is, why is it called dark? Is it really dark? How dark is it? Can we measure darkness? Light can measure, of course, but darkness, I doubt it. So we have previous and recent observations, because they have in observational astrophysics, we use satellites, to observe these distant objects emitting light. Now, what is the current view of the universe? according to scientists, physicists, astrophysicists, the universe is expanding and accelerating. Can you feel that? The universe is flat. Others say it's flat. We have the cold dark matter. About 90% of the universe is unknown. We just see those stars, those luminous matter that we see in the sky is just 10%. So 90% is unknown. Parang tip ng iceberg lang yung nakikita natin. Yung bigger part, yes, where we can see. So dark matter, there are many theories about this. We have non-baryonic dark matter. We have hot dark matter, we have warm, we have cold. And actually, we really don't know what is that. Because dark matter is invisible. But why is it important to know dark matter? Dark matter and its composition. In fact, it is invisible. Hindi natin makita, pero alam natin na dyan siya. These are some of the reasons why we have to know dark matter, since it is 90% of the universe. So first, to better understand our origin and destiny, to be prepared for the ultimate fate of our planet, our sun, our Milky Way galaxy. Then, to be aware of our existence in the vastness of the universe. So the universe, as we know, is a huge, wide open space that holds everything from the smallest particle to the biggest galaxy. So astronomers and astrophysicists try to measure the size of the universe, but no one really knows how big it is. So astronomers use telescopes and physics, okay, to tell whether an object in space is moving away from Earth or towards Earth. Okay. According to current observations, the universe is growing outward in every direction, meaning it is expanding. Okay? Why expanding? Parang kung mayroon kang balloon, okay, then may mga dots doon, as you blow the balloon, diba, nag-expand siya, yung mga dots doon sa balloon, yung distance nila, nag-increase. And that is what is observed now by our observations through telescopes. According to scientists, okay, about 13.7 billion years ago, a powerful explosion called the Big Bang happened. And this powerful explosion set the universe into motion, and this motion continues today. Scientists are not yet sure if the motion will stop, change direction, or keep going forever. Now, we have the structure of the universe. So we have here, you see the Earth first, the solar system, where the Earth is one of the planets revolving around that. Then we have the solar interstellar neighborhood. Then we have the Milky Way galaxy. So the large-scale structure of the universe is made up of voids. So nakita nyo na mga dots, pero mayroon din mga voids in between the dots. And filaments that can be broken down into superclusters, clusters, groups, and galaxies. So if we see it this way, we have the star. Yung nakikita yung stars sa taas, hindi yan star, actually they are galaxies. So if we have the star, then many stars, we call them galaxies. Now, the discovery of dark matter. Paano siya na-discover na hindi man siya napakita? Invisible siya. So matter is anything that takes a space and has mass. Okay, yan nakikita yung mga yellow dyan, yan yung visible or luminous matter. Yung mga stars nakikita natin sa taas can be seen because it emits light or reflects light. Nakita natin sila kasi emit or reflect. How about dark matter? Dark matter cannot be seen. It does not emit light also. It cannot be detected, but can only be inferred by its gravitational effect on the luminous matter. Ano yun? Okay. For example, yung wind or hangin. Can you see the wind? No. Can you feel it? To see is to believe does not apply here. Kasi we know there is wind that hindi natin nakita, but when wind touches our skin, we feel it, right? That is similar to dark matter. You cannot see it, but you can feel it. It can be inferred by its gravitational effect on the luminous matter. So by studying dark matter, scientists hope to discover the size, the shape, and future of the universe. Bakit? Kasi it's 90% of the universe. A large percent of the universe is dark matter. Determining the nature of this missing mass. Bakit tinawag siyang dark matter or missing mass? Kasi actually hindi mo talaga siya dark, as in dark. Hindi mo talaga siya makita, kaya sinabing dark. Or it is the term used by scientists to describe this thing which does not reflect or emit light. So, and this dark matter is one of the most important problems in modern cosmology and particle physics. Kaya tinawag nila dark matter mystery. So, some scientists believe that 23% of the universe is dark matter, 4% na ang luminous matter, in between stars and gas, and 73% is dark energy. So, mas malaki pa. In a cluster, ito yun. Okay? In the outskirts, ito yung rotational curve. Okay? Speed ng mga galaxies. If we have a galaxy and all the stars moving around at some speeds like this, okay? So from the center to the outskirts, as the distance from the center increases, the velocity increases, right? So this study was in 1989 by Digiman. Dark matter was postulated by John Oort in 1932 to account for the orbital velocities of stars in the Milky Way, and Zwicky, 1933, account for the evidence of missing mass. So yung term nila dati is missing mass. Rotation curves pa rin ng ating galaxies. So we have the other galaxies there. So you see that is the Milky Way galaxy, and if you look at it, the sun is there. So galaxy clusters. Okay. These are largest gravitational bound objects in the universe. They consist of galaxies. Of course, when we say galaxies, we also mean stars. Stars and galaxies. Many studies measured the mass of the galaxy, total mass of the galaxy, the mass of stars, okay, and the mass of dark matter. Okay. From here you can measure the mass of dark matter. So this is from study 8A and another study of Eagle 611. So ang mass is parang ganyan talaga siya, no? Meron kang stars, yung red, yung dark matter is yung blue. So something there. Kasi may ano talaga, may missing mass. And my research work. So in my research, because I focus on dark matter, I also measured the mass of this dark matter. It's the result of my study. So the red one is the total mass, the blue is the galaxy mass, and the gas mass between the stars. So this is another result of my study. So there's an interface radius, like may parang shorter lang siya. Dark matter dominated kasi, di ba sa outskirts, mas tunti yung stars. Dito naman sa center, mas illuminated siya, mas maraming stars doon. So it is stellar dominated, maraming stars. So there are some equations there that I don't know if you understand, but mathematics can understand it. So I will not elaborate about that, but these are the equations I used in my study to get the mass of the dark matter, the mass of the stars, and we have here some constants. So I will not explain it further because it involves a lot of programming techniques and models to get this data. So, and then I combine the two. So these are gas density profile that I got from the data. Why I use these two? So Chandra is most sophisticated sa X-ray telescope today. Okay, mayroon ng bago dyan. Siya pa rin yung pinaka-the best X-ray telescope. Actually, it's NASA's flagship telescope. So other models, of course, the popular NFW model for dark matter belong to, we have some models with the parameters that we want to make it simpler. Actually, physics is just not so complicated. What makes it complicated or complex is the mathematics. Okay, how do we measure the amount of dark matter? So by using X-ray observations, the mass of luminous and dark matter can be determined. So, una, total mass, then ang luminous mass plus dark matter, tapos time galing yung luminous mass doon sa stars plus hot gas doon sa intercluster region. Then, of course, X-ray luminosity collected by telescope. And ito yung ginagamit namin assumption. Okay, ano to? Hydrostatic equilibrium. It is a fluid wherein the outward pressure is being balanced by the inward force of it. I think it's hanggang dyan na ako.
Okay, at this juncture, we will be focusing on AI. That would be an exciting topic. So, our next speaker, I have the honor to present. She is also in the world of numbers. She is a professor in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics of this university, where she currently is designated as the Vice President for Research, Development, and Extension. She earned her bachelor's and master's degrees from Ateneo de Manila University, and her doctorate Research, Development, and Extension, none other than Dr. Debbie Marie Versosa.
Good afternoon to all. I think it's easier to stand here so we can see the screen. Okay, so my presentation, Mathematics for Humanity in the Era or Age of AI, because I think this is something that is very timely, no, artificial intelligence. So, palagay niyo kaya itong gawin ng technology? Siyempre, kaya. Madali. Cellphone kaya. Ito, kaya itong gawin ng technology? Sa mga estudyante, I'm sure, maraming may alam dito. Lalabas na yung sagot. Tapos, may steps pa. So, di ba? So, but otherwise, the steps are already there. So, yun na. Can the technology help you solve that problem? Yes. Just take a picture, yan na yung solution. Actually, when Photomath came out, I had to revise all my questions. Kailangan, syempre, yung tanong mo, hindi masolve ng Photomath. Kasi kung masolve, nilalobo na kayo ng estudyante niyo, di ba? So, I really had to transform the way I give assessments. What about this? Do you think technology can help you answer this next one? O, ito. Hindi na isolve ha, baka maubos yung time limit ko na 20 minutes. So, Joanna, can finish making a room. Ano? Can technology solve this? O, syempre. Ayun na, may sagot. Next. May sagot talaga. So, everything almost, no? You can think of a word problem, it can be solved by ChatGPT. So, my question is learning mathematics still important in this age? Because lahat naman ng math, kung isipin mo, lahat naman masolve na ng computer. We still need to learn math. And can artificial intelligence replace mathematics teachers? And maybe that's also something that we also want to think about, no? Palitan na kaya tayo, not just for math teachers, but the entire workforce. Do you think that artificial intelligence can replace our jobs at the moment for those who are working? Di ba nakakatakot? Wala kayo ng trabaho dahil sa artificial intelligence. So ito, may picture dito. Nasaan dito yung computer? Hindi ko alam kung ano sa isip mo. Where is the computer in the room? Kasi ngayon ang computer, nasa cellphone. Computer na yun. Now I challenge you, where is the computer? I will give you the answer. Sige. The woman is working as a computer. This was in 1949. Kasi bakit, di ba? Pag sabi ng driver, anong meaning ng driver? Nagda-drive. So, noong 1949, when you say computer, it means nagko-compute. So, ang computer ng panahon yun ay tao. But now, of course, they were replaced. We don't have computers like this anymore. That's why I think almost no one, maybe a few of you, recognize the computer in the room. The computer in the room is actually the woman. So this is again another example of a computer. So this is 1955. And there's a movie, maybe you've watched this movie, and the women there were actually computers. No? During that time, spaceship, they had to compute the project time. Wala pang high-tech na computer. Tao talaga yung nag-compute. So ang tanong, how technology has changed. Our view of teaching has also changed. We have what we call 21st century skills. So before, we had reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now, we focus more on higher order thinking, no? Comprehension, analysis, and so on. Okay, can artificial intelligence replace us? Maybe, well, it will not, but we have to adapt. No? These are actually some of the other core skills. I watched this from a webinar. It's not just specialized skills that we need, but we also need soft or core skills, including work ethic, career management, and public speaking, and so on. So, it's a fact. Calculators transform the goals of mathematics education. Ngayon, kung tanongin ko kayo, how will you compute tangent 42 degrees or log 7? Gagawin niyo? Siyempre, calculator, or tanongin niyo yung katabi niyo. So, that's how we compute. But before, how do you think they were computing those numbers? Long time ago, this is how they computed. Table of logarithms, table of trigonometric values. So, ganyan ang compute natin. Now, we have new technology. We again have to change the way that we teach math. Kasi nag-a-adapt eh. We have to adapt. In fact, tingnan nyo, may library book kasi yun. Yung mga humiram, kailan sila humiram? 1962. O, di ba? Noong 1962, yan ang ginagamit nila na pang-compute. Because scientific calculators were not yet handheld at that time. Ayan, siguro po, hindi lang may alam niya. Dati, para mag-compute kayo ng logarithm, gagamit kayo ng slide rule. Ayan, hindi na tinuturo because again, education has changed in response to technology. So, do you think that mathematics teachers during the 1970s lost their jobs when calculators were invented? Kasi, di ba, for the longest time, you've been teaching your students how to use logarithmic tables, trigonometric tables, slide rule, biglang may na-inventong calculator. Nawalan kaya sila ng trabaho. Ano palagay nyo? Hindi natin alam. But my guess is, they did not lose their jobs, but they had to adapt. Now that we have artificial intelligence, will we lose our jobs? Hopefully not. But we have to adapt. So we are now facing another technological revolution. Many fear will be obsolete. Palitan na kaya tayo? According to this document, we pursue a vision of AI where humans are in the loop. The idea of humans in the loop is part of our broader discussions happening about AI in society, not just AI in education. AI does not have the broad qualities of contextual judgment that people do. Therefore, people must remain responsible for the health and safety of our children, for all students' educational success and preparation for their futures, and for creating a more equitable and just society. And I think as teachers, sometimes we forget this. We only think about teaching our subject. We want to teach physics, we want to teach biology, mathematics, but we forget also that we want to contribute, for our students to be responsible citizens. So is creating a more equitable and just society a part of mathematics? Hindi ba yung math, 1 plus 1 equals 2 lang? Kinalaman nun sa politics, Philippines. Normally, we don't associate mathematics with our world. We don't associate mathematics with social justice. Mathematics is not value-free, including ethics, because it is a human invention. So mathematics has values. So in fact, I was thinking what to share today, and I thought about this article that I published 10 years ago. Matagal na to sa isip ko, sige, might as well. Mukhang ito yung babagay. So, reading the world with calculus. So, in one of the paragraphs there, I wrote, although an ethical approach to mathematics education may follow various agendas, a common theme is that the ultimate goal of mathematics education is not merely to enable participation in technological or economic development. Math education is not all about developing mathematical thinking. It involves the formation of a thoughtful person. Mukho, Padyay, and Greer introduced the term statistical empathy, arguing that mathematics can be a tool for communicating outrageousness and provoking outrage. Ultimately, the aim is to promote the growth of the student as competent, caring, loving, and lovable. It's not just myself who thinks that mathematics is actually integrated with our society. Many other researchers believe as such. Yung math, minsan naiisip natin magturo lang tayo ng math, physics, magturo tayo physics, but it says here, we also want to contribute towards developing competent, caring, loving, and lovable students. So in the article that I mentioned earlier, I actually focused on 2 issues, deforestation and income disparity. And I also discussed how I designed a lesson for those. I started with a motivational activity or a game, followed by, of course, the mathematics. The mathematics has to be there. And then interpretation and reflection. So I won't go into the details because that's already published, but I will share with you some of my students' reflections. First thing that I found was that actually many of my students also realized that we can integrate ethical issues in the classroom. So, siguro I'll just read the second quote, it's shorter. Math, to me at least, had never been before a subject that taught about real-world problems. Before, the problems given were mostly unbelievable situations like Adam bought 100 watermelons for 6,000 pesos. So, because most of the problems we give are contrived. But through our class, they realized that mathematics can in fact be used as a tool to read the world. Okay? So some students also expressed that they now have a new perspective about real-world issues. For example, in the first quote, I'm glad that Ma'am Verzosa actually opened up this topic, so poverty threshold. If not in class, where would we learn this stuff? Even just trying to imagine living my life at these standards is crazy. So my students also get to understand real-world issues, not just mathematics. Nakasulat sa ilalim, the woman I see begging for coins in the sidewalk or the little girl sleeping in the cardboard box is her, but it could have easily been me. A third theme is fear or outrage. So of course that's something that I said we should inform or provoke outrage. I really dislike these kinds of business people. I see their faces everywhere for being successful. But what exactly was the price of all their success? Was it thousands of acres of trees deforested or hundreds of children being abused in sweatshops? The fourth theme is self-reflection. This is good because they reflect on their own actions. So for the second quote, I am part, so na-realize itong sudyante, no? I myself am part of the system who pays for the wood, paper, and even food products that promote deforestation. I'm part of the species who buys lands to build shelters for the family, but in the process, kills and robs a lot of the other species' homes. I think this time we were talking about biodiversity. So what does this all tell us? It tells us that teachers can actually promote critical citizenship by mathematics, by empowering students to interpret and critique how information is presented in media, and so on and so forth. Actually, many of the information that I'm sharing with you is also from what I learned from webinars. So, nandiyan po yung webinar, it's actually from Paul Ernest, no, who talked about mathematics and ethics. So, I guess to end, I want to share with you my claim that artificial intelligence won't make us obsolete, but humans must be in the loop, as I said earlier, based on the document. And one way to do this is to use mathematics not just for doing calculations, because those calculations can be done by a calculator, or by solving contrived mathematics problems, because they can be done by AI. But by using mathematics for critical citizenship, for statistical empathy, to promote the growth of students as competent, caring, loving, and lovable people. So that's by Atway and Brady, 2009. So, baka isipin niyo ako lang nag-iisa nag-isip doon. Just a few weeks ago, this is the largest conference in mathematics education in the world, I think. It's held only every 4 years. This year it was held in Sydney, Australia. And in that big conference, it's truly recognized that critical citizenship is an important part of mathematics education, given by the fact that a plenary panel is entitled Mathematics Education Effectively Responds to Humanity's Problems. So mathematics is not just for contrived real-world problems in the classroom. It is actually useful, no, to promote social justice. How can humans remain competitive in the age of AI? So as I said, many of the things I'm sharing, I learned from other giants. So this is Po Shen Do from a plenary lecturer in the MathTech conference. Ang sabi niya, we can remain competitive if we create value. We don't just extract value. Anong value mabibigay niyo sa mundong ito? Kung mataas na mataas ang sweldo natin, nag-extract lang tayo. Bili. But what value do we create? No? So yun yung isipin natin. We can remain competitive in the age of AI, but we have to contribute. And I conclude by asserting that being human is what will make us relevant in this age of AI. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
So moving on, we will go to the world of the natural sciences. At this juncture, we will be taking a look at the minute things. This may be microscopic, may it be in the soil or water. Our speaker is one of the internationally trained nematologists in the Philippines, and currently a professor in the University of Southern Mindanao in the Department of Biological Sciences of the College of Science and Mathematics. She earned her PhD in Bioscience Engineering at KU Leuven, Belgium, and Master of Science in Nematology from Ghent University, Belgium. She is the current Director for Research Publication Services in USN, Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Agricultural Research, Development, Extension, and Technology, member of the Technical Working Group of Soxygen Industry, Energy, and Emerging Technology Research and Development Consortium. She is also an editorial board member of the Academia Journal of Biology, vice editor of the Journal of Sustainable Dryland Agricultural Systems, a technical evaluator for Commission on Higher Education or CHED projects and proposals, a reviewer for papers published in Web of Science and Scopus Index journals such as Plant Genetic Resources, Frontiers in Microbiology, Scientific African and Crop Protection, Rice Science, Ecological Indicators, European Journal of Plant Pathology, South African Journal of Plant and Soil, and Physiological and Molecular Plant Pathology. She also has published over 25 articles in the field of nematology, microbiology, and ecology with several citations. She currently manages and leads the R&D projects on USM Futures Thinking Program on Food Systems and Innovation of the Philippine Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation and Futures Thinking. Biological diagnostic tool using nematode under DOST, biocontrol agent for rubber leaf diseases of the Philippine Council for Agriculture, Aquatic and Natural Resources Research and Development, DOST. And Rhizobacteria and actinomycetes for biofertilizer and biocontrol inputs for organic agriculture industry of the Department of Agriculture, Bureau of Agricultural Research. She is also an inventor of the nematode picking tool, useful for the conduct of nematological techniques, and a co-inventor of the fungal formulation, T-POL-XV, for the biocontrol of pathogen causing leaf fall disease of rubber. In 2019, she was awarded as the most outstanding alumni in the research category of the University of Southern Mindanao. She is one of the founding members of the International Research Initiative on Agroecological Crop Protection, which aims to promote a paradigm shift in crop protection. She will share to us nematodes, unveiling the secrets of a friend or a foe. Let's welcome Dr. Cabasan.
Good afternoon. So from the outer space and from the world of math, I'm going to bring it back to the ground. As soon as we step our feet in the ground, we are going to interact with nematodes. So in my talk, you will know about nematodes, whether they are our friend or foe. But the first question is that a nematode? I'd like the audience participation. Give me a thumbs up if you agree, thumbs down if you don't, no, and you're not sure. Can I see that from the audience? Is that a nematode? Thumbs up. You're not sure. How do you know what is that? I hear you. That's an earthworm. That's not a nematode. Why? Earthworms have segments or segmentation. Nematodes, they are lungworms, quite closer to that, but unsegmented. Mostly, they are microscopic. But there are large nematodes, just like the one that causes the lymphatic filariasis. The lymphatic filariasis, the cause of the agent of that is the filarial nematode called the Wucheria perlpufti. So in the lower slide, you can see the foot that is being pointed is a white word coming out from the wound. So that's a nematode. Another, I don't know if you have seen when you have a homemade prepared vinegar, the tiny creatures that move around in the vinegar, that's the vinegar eel. We call that Turbatrix aceti. So there are diverse nematodes. Many of these can be found in the marine environments. Some are parasites of animals, including humans. Some are parasites of plants. And many are also found in the soil. They are less free-living in the terrestrial environment or in the aquatic environment. They have many different body shapes. They can be long and piliform, epsilon shape, C shape, globular, or lemon shape. And they are also transparent. How do they move? So they can move sideways. They can also move their body. They push it forward using their longitudinal muscle. And typical for the free-living nematode is that they move faster than the parasitic one. Now, how do they feed? They have a simple mouth, and they also have these stylets. So they will use it to puncture the plant tissue so they can extract the protoplast or the nutrients from the cells. Others will also use their teeth. Now, the nematode, once it enters the roots, they will establish the feeding site there, and the reaction from the plant is they will enlarge their cells. So what we call that as a hypertrophy. So when the cells enlarge, you can notice also that that's a root tip. The root tip also enlarge. So as an effect, the roots becomes gummed. So what you can see in the right side, how they feed, what do they eat? They can eat bacteria, they can eat fungi. They are also predators because they can also eat other nematodes. How about their life cycle? We already published this result. Maybe we can start with J2. That's the infective stage, the one that enters the roots or infect the plants. Now, when they are inside the roots, they turn into the J3, they continue on their development to become the J4. Now the size becomes larger until they become an adult female. By that time, it's about like 9 to 12 days, they can already start laying eggs inside the roots. Now after that, from the egg, the J1 will hatch to release the J2. For that complete life cycle, for that specific nematode, Meloidigyne they can complete the life cycle from 19 to 21 days. And the cycle is repeated. So imagine if that is a parasitic nematode in plants, how devastating they could be. How do they reproduce? Well, for human, we need the male, needs female, same thing with the nematodes. Some species will need a male and a female to reproduce. The one that you can see there, they're very sweet. There are species that reproduce by means of an egg, once hatched by the parent. And then another way of the reproduction is that they are hatched inside the female body. We call that endotokia matricica, intrauterine birth. Another mode is a parthenogenesis, meaning that the gametes are produced without the need for fertilization. So imagine, even if without the male, they can produce a lot of eggs. And again, if they are parasitic, that's dangerous. And there are those which are hermaphrodites, meaning they can take both male and female gametes in one organism. Nematodes can be friendly. These could be a useful animal. Why? Because they can help promote plant growth. They can help accelerate the release of this phosphorus and ammonia in the soil by feeding the microbes. Another is they can also help regulate in the climate regulation by intervening in the fluxes and flows of this carbon in and out of the soil. Another is they can help support biodiversity, terrestrial biodiversity. They can regulate the pests and pathogens, because I mentioned that some of them are predators. And then they are also important in the decomposition and nutrient cycling services. We actually use nematodes for biomonitoring in the ecosystem. This is a published paper with Bell and Mika. We try to look at the nematode taxa. So we use that to compute the different functional diversity indices and interpret what's the effect of this long-term monocropping of banana in the soil quality or soil health. So we try to look at those nematode community structure in the plantation 2 to 4 years continuous cropping versus those used for 5 to 9 years to 10 to 15 years. So we can even see, like if you look at the triangle, that for those, you can see the plus and the circle there, that those fields used for a long period of monocropping, we were able to produce a data that it could actually turn into a more stressful soil ecosystem. And then, on the next project that we are doing is, this is with the DOST, we try to use this nematodes as a biological tool. In the banana, monocrop versus the banana with intercrops. In cacao, with chemical applications versus without chemical applications. In rice, those that uses organic fertilizers versus synthetic fertilizers. So we are using nematode as a biological tool to interpret the soil health or soil quality. Different from the usual soil characteristics that we do using chemical parameters. Nematodes are also our hidden enemy because you can see. You need to use the microscope. One example is the Meloidigyne species. There are a lot of the species, but we commonly call them the root knot nematodes. Once they infect the plant, for example, it's a rice plant, you can see that the infected plants have stunted growth and fluorescence, yellowing. And if you are to uproot it, you can see that the roots are dulled. How do we understand that? It will interrupt absorption of nutrients. Consequently, it will affect the yield. To the next slide, you can see if it's infected plants, rice plants infected with nematodes. If you look at the data on the left side, it could actually result to a higher percentage of yield loss. If you look at the diamond there, that if plants are infected, yield loss could be as much or as high as 40 to 68%. You don't want that because the farmers will be affected. You want farmers to become rich. I tried to look at some populations. I took from Batangas, Bulacan, Cotabato, Laguna, and Tarlac. And then it's showing to us that these are the same species. Liloidegaini, Graminicula, Woodnut nematodes. It's showing to us that, okay, there are populations which are more aggressive because they can reproduce in high number inside the plant's roots. Nematodes, we can say virulent. Why? Because even if you look at Batangas, in the bar in the lower number, few nematodes only bad, but the yield loss is high. But there are virulent nematodes, aggressive nematodes, especially if they infect plants which are susceptible. But a different story is if they infect a resistant plant, some yes can penetrate in the roots, but they find it difficult to develop or reproduce inside the roots because they are resistant plants. And if I was able to look further, what's happening? When I did some cross sections. Here, if you are looking at the left side, if you do the cross sections, you can see, the brown circle thing there. These are nematodes, and there are a lot when they are present in susceptible plants, and they turn into female is able to lay several eggs. And so I mentioned of Liloidegaini, Graminicula infecting rice. It's only the rice that they can infect. They can infect as well other crops. Tomato, potato, next. Yeah, still in rice. Again, not only Liloidegaini, Graminicula, they can infect other kinds of nematode species. This one, I don't know if you encountered, if you try to uproot the plant, there's browning in the roots. It's caused by Hirschmanniella orangeae. It's a longer type of the nematode. And this one attacks the stem of the rice, Dictylenchus species. But another species infect the onion bulbs. This one, if you notice in the rice field that there's a formation of the white tip in the rice leaf, more probably it's caused by a different kind of species of nematode, Athelencoides deciduum. And this is our peanut, another nematode. Dictylenchus africanus, or peanut. So like to eat that. This is a different nematode, peanut efficient nematode. And yeah, this is also, we really have to watch for this. Once it is present in the field, it's really difficult to manage or control if Rhodophyllus unilis is present. But we are glad to say that we have not observed this in our sampling sites because this involves banana toppling and zero production. In corn, if you can see patchiness in the field, it should be uniform in size. But if you can see some patchiness, you check the roots and plants. And you can see maybe trichomonas, it's common for the corn stubby roots. And that is for yam, caused by Scutellonema borealis. And this is on coconut, Rhodinut fidelicus, Cocophilus, or the red-green nematodes. There are actually a lot more, but I'm not going to bombard with a lot of species of nematodes. But I'd like to end my thought, let's say, or quoting E.O. Wilson, we live in a nematode world. And so that's all.
So wow, what fascinating researchers we heard. We have from the graph theory, we have the dark matter, we also have the math for humanity, sa era ng AI, and nematodes, a friend or a foe. To increase further our understanding and learning, may I call or invite Professor Chrysler Citanalgo to serve as our moderator for the open forum.
So good afternoon everyone. So I think we'll have the discussion first, then we'll have the open forum. So for the audience, if you have questions among our professors and scholars, you can prepare, then you can go later after the discussion. Okay, so we'll have first
discussion, Sir Philip.
Okay, so good afternoon everyone. So this is related to graph theory. So we know that graph theory is related, to the different branches of mathematics and other sciences. So one of my questions is, what motivated you to push through graph theory? I love graph theory because we can see visually all the applications. Unlike real analysis or abstract algebra, it's more of a higher level. You just use your imagination. But in graph theory, we can draw the graph, we can picture it out, we can explore the edges and the vertices.
And from your presentation of Vanessa, so we think that the universe is really big. But then from the presentation, it's accounted 5% of the entire universe. The rest, 27 dark matter, 68 dark energy. And then from this, from your data, you are using the Chandra X-ray telescope and the ROSA X-ray telescope. When we discover this dark matter, it is based on these telescopes. There's a discrepancy in the orbital speeds of the galaxies and stars, as well as the gravitational force needed for these galaxies to be intact. My question is how reliable are these satellites? Because this will have a big effect on our present understanding of the universe as well as the future understanding of our universe. So how reliable are these satellites that we are using?
Okay, first of all, satellite is an instrument. On board the satellite is a telescope. That is actually, this is the instrument capturing or detecting the light from distant objects, okay, like galaxies emitting light, so we capture them. So these instruments, when we say reliability, okay, so maybe all instruments are not 100% reliable. There is always what we call as human error and instrumental error, right? So I can say that the reliability of these instruments is maybe 70%, not totally 100%. The 30% there remains, the error. Because you see, they are very far from us, these galaxies, and yet through the light they emitted, we observe from the telescope, this light emitted from these galaxies will be converted into a spectra. You will see the spectrum, the absorption lines, emission lines, and you will see there in the absorption lines what kind of elements or molecules are emitting or absorbing this absorbed, right? From there, we analyze the data from the spectrum. So we see there the elements. From this spectrum, we also compute the density, then the mass, using, of course, programs. From our observation of these very distant galaxies, we can, somehow measure what is beyond our galaxy. Other galaxies also we can measure.
Good afternoon, everyone. So right now we can realize with the presence of AI right now that we are going back to the very heart of humanity, which will be the development of our core values. So I think this will be a challenge for us in developing our courses in mathematics. With this in mind, what will be the direction of mathematics education in USM?
Actually, what I presented today was like, for each lesson you really have to plan a long time. And I think I have great confidence in our math department. Just last 2022, many of us attended the social justice seminar in Ateneo de Manila University. And I think we can draw on that. But it's not going to be easy because for the longest time, we've been used to teaching mathematics from a pure sense, no?
Good afternoon po, speakers and everyone. I am a fourth-year student po sa Biological Science Department po. So, my question would be, how and where will it start if I take up, or if I ever decide to conducting a research that involves nematodes?
Okay, so in agronematology, you can see that there are also different nematode species affecting crops. So we have a crop of interest.
I've recently read po your research with Miss Ambel, senior from our department din po. And it's about how to raise family of nematodes po. And I really want to explore about those nematodes.
Okay. So in the paper, I mentioned that we studied banana with different cropping durations. And it's very surprising to see one group of nematode, a family of nematode. They are parasitic, they are becoming high in percentage in the fields. So you're correct, you mentioned Hoplolimidae. So I appreciate if you'd like to pursue that study. So what we're going to do, because we're still starting, maybe get some soil samples from a banana field we have here in the campus, get some soil, bring that in the lab. We already have some procedures how to do that. We will extract nematodes from the soil. You can modify your setup. And for the student and other researchers, you definitely have to improve your microscopy skill. The rest, if you are working that, because in the Department of Biological Sciences here in USM, we already established the nematology lab, and we thank the USD for supporting us in the sustainability of this lab, and hopefully we can submit some more proposals to continue its operation. So you're very much welcome to work in the lab, and whatever supplies and materials we have there, that will be free for the students to use. So that's it. So we start with getting your soil sample and bring it in the lab, do the extraction, do the microscopy work.
Okay, so I guess the discussion between the discussant and our speakers are all great. And now the audience are now welcome to throw their questions, inquiries, or whatever you want to ask some speakers natin, especially they are very busy with their research. So I think this is the time that you can ask questions. If there are things that you are interested to know deeper, maybe collaboration or work together within their group or their research labs. Anyone?
Good afternoon. So I'm Hans Perez, and my question would be directed among the paper Sosa regarding mathematics in the era of AI. So we have learned that modernization in this time is really fast. The upgrades in technology has been overwhelmingly fast. So if that time comes that AI will be able to interpret and emulate core values and even emotions of humans, what will the mathematical educators offer to the students in the field of education? And will mathematical educators still be an asset in the workforce?
Right now, ChatGPT, they can solve math problems, but they cannot feel. No, they cannot have these soft skills. But I think in the future, it's indeed possible that that will happen. So I think in that world, there will be another set of skills as well that we will need to adapt to. Maybe it's too early now to tell, but maybe it's just, as I mentioned earlier, the adaptability. We have to be prepared for change. We cannot be complacent. We have to know that whatever ChatGPT is or AI is at the moment, it will really improve at a very fast pace, and we have to improve even faster than that. So we really have to adapt as a species.
Good afternoon, speakers. My question will be directed to Dr. Tabasan. I'm curious about the analysis of the data analysis that you've used in the study you presented about the, I didn't try to grasp, but it's about that implication. I want to ask what tool was used, what were the objectives why it was used, and how do you interpret results na na-obtain sa ganung klaseng analysis?
Because nematodes, I mentioned there are a lot of nematode taxa. They are already categorized or grouped into, we call the CP groups. Where we can group according to their being a persister or colonizer. So first you have to group all the nematodes that you can identify, and we are identifying thousands of them in the lab. So identify them into which group, into what CP value, and then group them again into which trophic level. Who among these are herbivores, who among these are frugivores. So you group them into different groups. And then there's already a tool that's what we call the Ninja, the Nanotel, the indicator joint analysis. That's AI. Yeah, because you can already just put in the data and then just one click gives us a triangle. Okay, so thanks for the AI. And then we look at some more other comparisons. If we have diversity in the system, we do comparisons as well.
Okay, so good afternoon, speakers. Yung question ko po is directed kay Dr. Vanessa. Disclaimer lang, pro-dark matter ako based sa mga evidences ng, sa scientific literature about dark matter. So, yung evidences natin ng supposed missing mass, how do we know that those are particles and hindi siya related sa alternative theories of gravity? Bale, hindi siya problem, but how can we tell that it is a problem of matter and hindi sa modified gravity? Kasi di ba po, merong alternative theories of gravity we have now, we have the modified Newtonian dynamics.
Honestly, no one knows. Because it is invisible, right? It's dark matter. Now, there are many theories existing now, like one that is modified, they're trying to modify Einstein's equation and to get rid of this dark matter concept, because many scientists also don't believe in dark matter. And many scientists believe because of the observations. That is why sa Einstein na time, sa time ni Einstein is wala pa namang mga teleskopyo na sophisticated, diba? During his time. And yet, he wrote about this and this equation. That's why they are trying to modify this equation, because in this equation, it implies something is missing there. But we don't know. Now, after Einstein, many scientists tried to modify this equation in order to get rid of this dark matter, because technology is more advanced this time, that you can measure anything you want, diba? Sa universe o dito sa Earth, as long as yung ating technology is kaya niya. Here, because of these discrepancies, diba? Merong mga scientists na sinasabi nila, wala dark matter, kasi baka ano lang yan, ibang particle yan, diba? As you have mentioned, in CERN, in SLAC, only that is in Stanford, in the US. So, there are big collider experiments there. They try to, particles collide to create another particle or to, yung parang i-disintegrate yung particles. In order to, other experiments also, underground, okay? Just to detect the dark matter. Also, other countries create this satellite to detect also dark matter in space. But actually, dark matter is elusive, invisible. Di ba rin siya nagpaparamdam talaga sa atin? Ayaw mo.
Good afternoon. I am Floreline, an MS Biology student, majoring parasitology. So my question is, of course, Dr. Cabasan. My question po is, what are the regulatory frameworks or measures in terms of the use of nematicides or the production of the beneficial nematodes, and paano po yun makaka-improve in terms of facilitating sustainable agriculture?
Thank you for asking that question. There are actually a lot of nematicides have been banned because of the toxic effect to the environment. So, trying to look at different options, it's possible that we're not going to use chemical nematicides. Other researchers are trying to research on biopesticides, one that get from plants. But yeah, they could be effective in the lab condition, but they could have different effects when they are now used in the field. So that's one thing that we have to look at. Others are trying to look at maybe cultural practices, if we can improve or reduce the pathogen using cultural practices. So it's like an integrated approach. So there's not one definite, sure approach to solve the problem on pathogen or pest in the field. So it's an integrated, but I hope that we can find a sustainable approach with that.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have one more question from Sir Jonah.
Questions pointed to Dr. Vanessa. I will combine science and say religious faith, because as what I can see in your illustration, I can see now that Earth is just a subset of the galaxy, and we have the universe, and we always pronounce that our God is the God of the universe. So we can see that there are a lot of things, forces holding the universe by somewhat which we call God. And however, there are a lot of people who are not believing in God. But the Bible is mentioning to us that there will be there is a phenomenon wherein people will just fly away when God will come, and that's called rapture. Now, as an astrophysicist, the objective is always to find places where we have the same conditions with the Earth, because the only problem, like what Elon Musk is saying now, is to produce a transport vehicle where we can transfer one from Earth to another areas in the country, in some galaxies, which is parallel to Earth, because we know that Earth will just be destroyed in the future because of man's doing. So, is this possibilities? So maybe later on, some atheists would say people from Earth are just transferred to another galaxy using something. There is technology improves transport, but of course the reality is people are being raptured, and some people, especially for those who are chosen, and some people who are not chosen will remain on Earth, and we will accuse some religious group that they were kidnapped and put in another galaxy. Is this possible? Thank you.
Okay, so that's a very good question. Thank you, Sir Jonah. Actually, you asked as an astrophysicist, right? As an astrophysicist, the more I study the universe and all the galaxies therein, the more I believe that there is someone more intelligent than us who created all these things. So if we compare religion and say faith, right? Evolution, the theory of evolution says that these things come from the Big Bang, that in the very beginning there's a Big Bang, that what we see now is the result of the Big Bang. That's what the Big Bang theory is. And the theory of creation says in the Bible, I'm also a Christian, so in the Bible that God created all these things. It takes faith to believe that God created these things, right? And it takes more faith to believe that these things happen from nothing. So as a Christian, as an astrophysicist, I believe that someone more intelligent than us, some people call it aliens, because they are not from our Earth, created all these things. Because, you know, from the solar system, the Earth, why is this like this? Created this. Why other planets are not like Earth? As we know now, the only planet, okay, with intelligent beings like us, and not only people, the humans, there are animals, plants, you know, fish, nematodes. Who made them? They just exist from the rock, which is from the beginning, they explode, become humans. Do you believe that as we study the universe, the more we study the creation, the more we confirm that someone created all this. And there is a design that, say, for example, the solar system, dyan lang, Earth, hindi ba pwedeng maglipat sa ibang galaxy? Because it's there. It was put there. And why the Earth is very small compared to the Jupiter, Saturn, and everything. And why Earth? Because Earth is, many observations now, there are so many Earths discovered, like Earth. But they're greater than Earth or smaller than Earth, and all of them are in what we call as the habitable zone. This habitable zone is the same distance the Earth to the Sun, and their planets to their suns. So who decided that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I guess that's one of the questions that we have to answer still in the future. So it's a very rich discussion between the audience and our speakers. And I know some of you still have many questions and inquiries, but we don't have that much time.
We now move on to the closing remarks, which will be delivered by the dynamic and energetic Vice President for Research, Development and Extension, Dr. Debbie Marie B. Versosa. Ma'am Debbie.
Before we end, I do hope that this is the end but not the end, because this is the inaugural series of Spark. And I do hope that whatever lectures we have had here, it led to fruitful discussions. Meron po sana kayong napuno, because the aim of this is actually brought about by the initiative of our university president. He believes that USM has the experts. We do have the experts, we have the professors and the returning scholars, but we seldom have opportunities to actually discuss what we've learned from our studies, and this is one avenue for that. And in fact, I myself, even though I was a lecturer, I avidly listened to the discussions, and I was very amazed because the other three lecturers or speakers for today, they're all my companions in the College of Science and Mathematics, but we never discussed dark matter. And we never discussed graph theory, or si Ma'am Dory, I'm always with Ma'am Dory, we never ever discussed nematodes. So this is a very, very good opportunity. Now I have a better understanding of the research of my colleagues. And in fact, I do believe that this can lead to further collaborations. So again, this is just the start. Thank you for coming. Maraming salamat.